we were filming, you know, we both set up the camera, or like I would set up the camera and then he would look through to check that it was okay, and then he would set up the camera and I would look through to check that it was okay, and then that was pretty much the way for the middle part of the film. The first part of the film we both had a camera, so the collective part, yeah, we were both filming at the same time. So
and that's a much more fluid part of the film,
yeah,
isn't it?
Yeah, it was much kind of freer. You know, we wanted it to be a bit more kind of free floating. We were staying with those people for quite a long time, so there was like yeah, like the idea that we were able to sort of dip into things when we felt necessary.
Before getting too much further into the specifics of how you made the film, I was interested to know your answer to the question, first off, what's the purpose of the film as far as you're concerned?
I mean, thinking about purpose, I mean, that's quite a hard thing. I mean,
what process do you want them to go through whilst they're watching the film?
Well, I don't think it's like a singular thing. I don't necessarily want them all to go, like every viewer to go through the same thing. I mean, I like the idea that films are, you know, I prefer films when they're the basis for like people to have quite different reactions and responses, rather than maybe more conventional filmmaking where the reading is fairly directed and you know, you're kind of given all the answers. So to think of it as having one particular purpose is, I don't know if that's really the goal. It's more like asking, you know, setting up something which asks questions and rather than, you know, giving answers. I mean, we were talking about, Ben and I were talking about, you know, what, well, originally we were talking about what, you know, what it might mean to live, you know, different ways of trying to live in the world in a kind of positive way, because we felt sort of bombarded by cynicism, and, you know, so we wanted to ask questions about, yeah, kind of having a positive relationship to the world, which seems quite difficult in a way.
It's hard to present. It seems to be hard to present a utopian community without either presenting it in a sort of naively utopian way, or, as is more often in the case, like in a film like Tilsemans or Together or whatever, it gets very negative very quickly, doesn't it?
It's very easy to mock a community. It's and we all know the kind of failures of it. We know so we were trying to think about things where we know failures have happened, but people still kind of maybe are in a sort of have the opinion that it's still worth trying. You know, so even like, you know, when you think about living in the solitude, which is something that I've tried to address a few times in other films, you know, we were talking about how, you know, we were talking about Thoreau and Ted Kaczynski, you know, how like, you know, they both basically...
Two giants of American literature.
Exactly, two giants of American literature who started out with basically the same fundamental reasons for taking themselves off into the wilderness. But you have like two really radically different
approaches.
Well, kind of yeah, approaches and the eventual outcomes. You know, so there's you know, so you know, what we were thinking about was like trying to think about ideas of utopia, but imagining that they weren't things that you could think about as finite, as something that you arrive at and then it's perfect and then you stay there, but rather something that is sort of transitory, and that is probably more realistic to think of utopia as something that is ultimately unattainable, but it's something that you can kind of pass through. And
there's that thing that Rilke says, that you live the questions in order that one day you can become the answers.
Yeah, I mean, we could have had a quote like that, which might have helped.
But then you're not. It seems to me that if there is an intent in the film, it is to sort of I don't like the word deconstruct, but kind of remove narrative in such a way that it does give people the opportunity to take from it what they will.
Yeah,
but you're presenting as a blank canvas as possible in that context.
Yeah, definitely. We really wanted Rob to, any time he sort of attempted to act, we they either got cut out, or we tried to get rid of those things, so that he doesn't become a character. He's more like a vehicle to take you through these things. So to get rid of any kind of psychological narrative, but as soon as you put one thing after the next, you're always going to have some kind of narrative trajectory. You can't sort of fail to have that, but we try to pare it down as much as possible so that it's pretty open, and you can project certain answers onto him.
Well, when you present a film called A Spell to Ward Off the Darkness, it immediately made me think that you were presenting cinema as a form of magic. Is that how you view it?
Yes.
And how and why?
I mean, that's, it sort of relates to this idea of utopia as a temporary moment, something that you can collectively experience. But it's also an individual experience. It's a little bit it's a lot like a live music show, which is why that was really important to have that at the end, as it's this collective thing, but it's also an individual. It's a very subjective and phenomenological kind of moment.
So what was it? That word? I've never heard that word.
Phenomenological.
Oh, okay. So it's just something that's happening there and then.
It's in the moment.
Right. Yeah.
It's experiential. And I guess Ben and I, we both believe in cinema as that kind of thing as well, as something which is it's not a representation of the world, it's something that exists here, and so that it's an experience that happens here. It's collective, it's social, but it's also very private at the same time, and and there is a kind of magic to it. I do believe in the magic of cinema.
If nothing else, you have to always do. I love that magical leap you have to do between every one of those frames to fill in the gap. That in itself is magic to me. Final question: to what degree do what we see on screen? To what degree is that kind of how you think, as opposed to what you think? If you see what I mean, because the editing process is kind of analogous to how the human mind operates, but it's also you're putting some suggestions up on screen there.
Yeah, I mean you can't help but have your own ways of thinking in something that you make. Having said that, I mean, one of the things about the commune section is probably the better example of we wanted there to be we really wanted there to be language in that spoken language, because that's a part of the way that they live, is that they're talking and they're trying to work through these kind of problems, and it's awkward and it's unfinished. And I don't, so there's a tendency to always to think that if you put language in a film, then that's also the language of the filmmakers. And
so there was no scripting involved?
No, there's no scripting. It's though it's we did, you know, we were with them for quite a few weeks, and we kind of prompted questions, you know, because obviously, actually, if you're living in a collective space, you're not talking about collective living all the time. You're talking about you know, who's making the dinner and that sort of stuff. But we wanted that kind of conversation, so we had to like set up those things, and you know, so we would ask those sort of questions to instigate conversation, and then and kind of listen to things, and then get them to kind of repeat conversations they'd had for the camera. You know, because we're shooting on film, we've only got a finite amount of film to use. So it's a kind of setup, but a kind of reenactment, I suppose, of things that they're already kind of thinking about.
I mean, it seemed to me watching the film that what you do very effectively is by presenting reality in a contemplatory, kind of unfiltered sort of way. Than when the stuff which is kind of more appears to be more, if I can use the word manipulated, comes in, it's sighted in reality, and so it fits much more comfortably in that context.
Yeah, I mean that's the hope in a way. I mean, when the main model for the sort of commune part was a film called Milestones by Robert Kramer, which was a film made in like the early 70s, which was a kind of response to the sort of breakdown of the hippie dream. You know, it's like where things started to collapse, the commune started falling apart, and like free love suddenly became not such a great idea. And so
sooner or later you end up with somebody's finger up your ass that you don't want.
Yeah, but that, you know, that's a really nice analogy for like how, you know, collective living sort of working.
Yes.
But oh, that's so weird. Yeah, so, but you know, but the thing about Milestones is that it's, you know, most of it is it was made in a similar sort of way. It's kind of like it's real people who are existing in this certain sort of like time and experience, but they're kind of reenacting themselves in a way, and that's what we were doing. I mean, these folk, they don't actually live in that place. They live somewhere else, but they live together.
In that manner.
They live together in that manner, and but we also brought in a few people. So like half of them live in one sort of collective space, and the other half come from other sort of like communes, and so we didn't just have like one ideology. You know, that there was like a number of different sort of takes on it to try and promote argument, but actually they didn't argue that much, which was slightly disappointing.
And you weren't. I'm not going to. I said I was going to ask any more questions, so I might be tempted though I am. Do we have any questions out in the audience for Ben? Gentleman in the middle there got in first. Yes, so you sir.
Who burnt the hut down and why?
Well, we burned the hut down because it seemed appropriate for the film.
Was it your hut?
No, it belonged to a farmer called Zachary who wanted to get rid of it. It was in the middle of his field, and he had to drive his tractor around it all the time, and it was frustrating for him. Yeah, we had a fixer up in the north of Finland where we were filming that particular part of the film, and yes, he helped us sort of find it, and yeah, I mean, this guy wanted to get rid of it, but then as soon as he found out we were making a film, he said we could do it for like €1,000 or something, and we spent a week haggling down to. It was €400 in the end, and but it was worth it. It was one of the most exciting things I've ever filmed.
So the gentleman here had a question.
I really wanted to ask you about the musicians, how you got them involved, but I'm kind of drawn to asking another question because I saw 2 Years at Sea a couple of years ago, and am I right in thinking in both films there was a long static shot of somebody fishing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you fish?
No, I don't. I
okay.
just haven't fantasies of fishing.
See, neither do I, but I sort of thought that you might, because I got this idea that I wondered if there was any relation or connection between that pastime, which is, I guess, where patience is so integral to it, almost more the object of the fishing than actually catching the fish. And is there a connection between that kind of patience and maybe the patience it takes to watch a long static shot like that?
I think they're probably really similar. Yeah. I mean, I don't fish. I don't feel like I need to lake for a long period of time. I guess I don't need. I don't feel like I need to fish in order to like do that. But I think that's I mean, there's definitely like a similar thing going on. I've spoken to people who like to fish, and it is basically because they want to just sit there for a day, and they don't. It's not. I don't think it is about eating fish or something like that. I'm interested in really looking at stuff and spending time looking at stuff and doing that with films and because we often don't. I mean I don't think it's that often that films spend that sort of kind of time. I mean, I'm interested in time, and we were talking a lot about different kinds of screen time for this film. Ben and I, like each of the sections has a different sort of approach to screen time. So the first one is quite sort of free and sort of elliptical, but it sort of is supposed to sort of take place roughly in the kind of space of time that we were there, and then
it feels more first person, that kind of camera work there as well. You feel like you're part of that group.
And you kind of you're there and you're just sort of drifting around. I mean, that's how it was for us personally. And then the second part, we wanted to become a lot more sort of stylized and elliptical in a sort of a long, suggesting a longer period of time spent that Rob spends in this sort of space. And then the last part is like really like in the moment. It's like it's almost an unbroken shot, like in real time.
Was that a bastard to shoot? It looked like it might be been quite tough.
Well, we had a really good Steadicam operator. So we rehearsed it a few times, and then we drew him maps for each of the sort of songs. I mean, so we're shooting 400-foot reels, which are 400-foot reel of 60mm is about 10 minutes. So we drew him a map for each roll of film, which is roughly 2 songs, and then he followed that really closely, and like I was just like standing behind him, like holding his waist and just giving him a little tug every now and again but it's filmed in a it's not like a set up show. Well, it is set up, but it's it's an actual gig, with like a normal paying audience. So it was rehearsed without the audience, but when the audience were there, I mean, that shot is just done in just one gig, Saturday night. And our band were like the support act before like a more well-known act. Because the band in the film, they're made up. They're 4 really great musicians who play in other sort of black metal bands, but they came together specifically for this film.
So, do we have any more questions out there? Gentleman there.
Why did you choose a band that plays death metal music?
It's black metal.
Big difference.
It's I mean, you know, if it is quite big difference in terms of like if you're really into it. I mean, I'm not like a big follower or anything, but there was a reason for it being black metal rather than death metal, because black metal comes out of Norway, and originally the whole film was going to be shot in Norway. And
the culture associated with black metal is quite serious as well.
It's really serious, and there's, you know, it's problematic as well. There's you know, it's kind of based in a sort of like, you know, there's some like Aryan issues wound up in a bunch of the bands involved in it, and but what, you know, the way we came to it was we were thinking about. Originally, we were thinking about making a film that involved Viking reenactors, and like wondering why people would do that, and like what was the kind of the urge to like look back into like a pre-Christian sort of pagan past and try to live it, and the Viking reenactors just seemed too sort of jokey. Whereas like black metal has a similar sort of incentive. You know, they're sort of like obsessed with this this sort of pagan past and the relationship to this sort of sublime landscape of Norway and Scandinavia.
Atavism. Is that what it is? Isn't it? You know.
And you know, that even though it's problematic, it's like there's something like you know, trying to find meaning, maybe like a less kind of materialistic meaning in the world.
It seems to me a lot of it's about the desire to, on the one hand, have an acute and meaningful sense of self, but at the same time to lose that sense of self at the point at which perhaps you become acutely lonely and it gets too existential.
Yeah, I mean that's the sort of problem. I mean, and that's what happens. I mean, and that's what kind of maybe we weren't thinking about at the beginning, but that kind of came out while we were making the film, and especially during the editing, is that this character, if we can call him that, there is a kind of essential sort of loneliness to it, and it's not necessarily working.
Is there a reason why? It seemed to me that it kind of started off more cheerful, and then in the middle it's more contemplative, and then towards the end it's perhaps a little more.
But you know, it's. I mean, I think one of the things that you know, when you talk about utopia, is that it's you know, it's different for different people, and that's another thing that we were interested in. And you know, for some people, that first section is an absolute hell.
We live in Brighton. It's not terribly unfamiliar, is it?
Or the second, you know, and you know, some people love black metal, and that bit is really relaxing and comforting for them. So it, you know, and that's kind of takes me back to, you know, what I said at the beginning, that it's, you know, it's not. You know, it's not really meant to be about presenting answers. It's like propositions.
Does anybody else have another question for Ben? Cheerful one?
Can I just ask about
Yeah.
lighting? I'm not a very technically minded person, but it seems very naturalistic. Was it sort of an augmented natural light, or am I missing out on tens of thousands of pounds worth?
No, no, we didn't have that kind of money. It's all available light, natural light, or well, the first two sections are just sun, and then fire, and then the last one is lights, a bit like these.
But loads of CGI, right, afterwards.
Yeah, there's a lot of CGI. We were actually going to end with CGI. Originally we were going to end with CGI Aurora Borealis, but we didn't have a budget.
And it probably would have been more expensive to stay around there long enough to get it for real.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are you doing?
I'm making a film about a 75-year-old painter called Rose Wiley, which is partly shot already. I don't know what it will be, how long it will be or anything, but yeah, it's, she's a great painter, and I just wanted to, yeah, it's very small, it's just me and turning up at her house occasionally and filming her.
Having a small amount of experience in that area myself, it seems if you want to make something that you don't know what it is until you've sort of made it, then it's best to make it, to keep it manageable on that side of things.
I mean, that's pretty much how I've made all my films, actually. I like, I'd like to not know what the outcome is going to be generally, and so yeah, that keeps it, so I deliberately keep it sort of small, and there's not many people involved.
And no one's too worried about what it's going to be because they're given too much.
Yeah, no one's too worried. Maybe with this film, we had French producers, which they had a lot of trust in us, but they maybe wanted to see more brushes and stuff than people have in the past, but still they gave us a lot of freedom.
All right, last call for questions. Anyone? No. All right, Ben Rivers, thank you very much indeed. Cheers.